Folks, just a bit of background. As you know, shared living in South Africa is a thing, and it's getting more and more. The pressure for housing demand in South Africa is kind of at the bottom end of the scale, where people tend to live together. And part of that living is sectional title estates. I don't have an exact number for how many sectional title estates there are in South Africa, but the market forces are there for huge growth still. The issue with these estates is that they, it's a group of people living together, and they've got laws and regulations governing their operation. And it turns out that we have a man here this afternoon who's made a point of studying that and can advise on what it is about these estates that seem to predetermine whether they take up renewables or not. So, the pressures are up here with the 20% tax incentive on solar panels and the 18 to 19% increase in electricity prices, which is we're expecting. So it's exciting times, and those pressures within these estates are going to grow. Interesting thing about the estates is that they have the ability to self-organize, and so they can potentially feed into the grid or partially supplement their grid take-up, and that reduces the energy bill quite radically. So expecting that would possibly place some pressure on municipal revenue at some stage in the future. So exciting times, lots of uncertainty. Now, Abrie has got 32 years acting as a consultant in the property industry as a town planner, and is also somewhat of a backpacker and a couch surfing ambassador for SA. So if you invite him into your home, just make sure he leaves. Otherwise, he'll sleep on the couch. Okay, Abrie, I think at this point I must stop making noise and give the floor to you.
Okay.
Welcome to you, and so thanks so much for agreeing to come and give us the background.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I just have a battle at the moment to share the presentation, so just bear with me. I think in the meantime, I'm going to introduce Glen. He's joining us today. We do these presentations as a team normally. Glen is more on the technical side. And as you said, I'm a town planner, but involved in sectional title most of the time. And of course, as you said, in the sectional title industry, it is really quite an interesting time to be. And so what I'm going to share is more the non-technical side and more the sectional title side that have quite a bit of implications. Glen, while I battle with the presentation, perhaps you can start off and share a bit about yourself and the industry where you're involved in. Glen, perhaps you can start with the first slides. That's anyhow your part of the presentation.
Yeah, for exactly the same reason we got Abrie and I got together to start talking about solar in the sectional title space. Abrie, with all the abilities and skills in terms of the legislation around creating roof spacing and the rules, etc., and ourselves with knowledge of solar. Trevor's actually also on this talk as well. So yeah, he's the mileage behind this thing. As you've said, the complexity around the sectional title space and the laws do provide a number of challenges for complexes, and pressure is mounting to find the right solution. Abrie, if you would like, you can come back to that, but he's a town planner and many years of being involved. Abrie, do you want to take up your stuff here?
Yes, I can just give a bit of background as it started off My interest is in connecting the dots between all the professionals in the industry, and therefore it's also interesting for me to deal with the electrical engineers, because all of us are in the same industry. Property is the name of the game. And if we look at something like solar, there are so many different professions that is involved in it. And as far as our involvement, it's more from the town planning side, and then, of course, the architectural side. When we add that together, we get sectional title that is superimposed on all of these existing rules and regulations. And it is almost impossible for any normal human being to understand the complexities about it. In practice, in sectional title, most owners believe that they buy a unit, and the unit include the garden, the carport, the outside of the building, and the lapa. And in fact, that is not the case. And one of the major issues, as far as solar is concerned, and we'll go a bit in detail on that, is the fact that the roof does not belong to the owner of the section. And therefore, it is highly problematic if people assume that they can use roofed areas to install panels. And yeah, we'll talk a bit more about that. Glen, perhaps you can start off with those slides.
Okay, so I mean, what is renewable energy? I think everybody sort of largely has an understanding of it at the moment, and specifically solar has become the focal point currently. It's a collection of bits and pieces. Solar panels obviously need sun to generate some form of power. That power is either used or stored or a combination of both. As Abrie was saying, the roof is never ever the homeowners unless certain things take place, unless certain procedures are followed, or unless, and I think this is becoming more and more the way forward, is that the body corporate actually owns the solution outright and does things in a fashion. So yeah, that's the basis of solar batteries, panels, inverters, in some form of configuration to do something with that. And I say something with that as it's as vague as that. What do we actually want to do with it? Key considerations. I think this is your bit, Abrie.
Okay. Yeah, the key considerations, of course, when we look at any solar installation in sectional title as well as full title, of course, is the ownership. Now, in full title properties, of course, we don't have that problem. The owner will purchase the system, install it, and he will be responsible for it. But in sectional title, and we'll go into detail a bit later, we have what we call the section, we have what we call common property, and then a specific type of common property that is called exclusive use. So the first thing that must be decided is where is these panels fixed, as well as the inverters and batteries and stuff. And then, of course, one will be able to determine now who's the real owner of it. Then, of course, we have in a complex the aesthetic considerations. Part of the value of a unit in a section is the appeal of the whole complex. Now, you can imagine if people just each do his own thing. Some install panels on the top of the roof, some at angles, some on in garden areas, and whatever. That is the first thing that will disappear, and that is the aesthetic appeal of the complex. Then, of course, all the structural considerations that you'll know a lot about, and that will be the type of roof, it will be the weight that will be on the roof, not only the panels, but also when installing it. Then, of course, all the legal considerations as far as safety, the financial considerations, cost, who pays for what, when, and how. And then, lastly, but important, maintenance-wise, how will these panels and infrastructure be maintained, and who will be responsible to insure it? What will be the consequences for the complex if a fire should start because of batteries or because of panels? Uh, and all of those things needs to be dealt with before a body corporate can give permission for anybody to enter. As far as the structural integrity of buildings is concerned, of course, we have in the sectional title regulations, PMR 30D state that the body corporates must take care at all reasonable steps to ensure that the member or any other occupier of a section or exclusive use area does not make alterations to a section or exclusive use area that are likely to impair the stability of the building or interfere with the use and enjoyment of other sections, the common property or the exclusive use area. Now, that's already a starting point where the body corporate must take responsibility for those actions, and therefore just allowing an individual to carry on its own without following due process is not the way to go. Unfortunately, as Glen also said, the knowledge about the implications and purely the fact that, as I said, the roof does not belong to the owner, um, is not widely known or accepted or preferred to be accepted in sectional title. People are under pressure to provide themselves with some electricity, and they get bombarded by special offers without understanding the consequences of it. And yeah, therefore, that's something we need to take care of. And then, of course, the additional insurance for individual social panels in sectional title, Section 14.1 of the STM Act states that notwithstanding the existence of a valid body corporate insurance, an owner may obtain an insurance policy in respect of any damages to his or her section arising from the risk and not covered in the policy. But again, of course, we need to, the body corporate need to ensure what is covered by its existing policy and what will be additional and who will pay for it, and what is the possible alternative problems that that's not covered by the insurance policy. We will move now to the level of consent for consideration. So the one solution that is proposed and that we are involved in a lot is creating the exclusive use areas, and there's typically two ways that can be done. But firstly, to create exclusive use areas in sectional title, you need a special resolution, and that means you need 75% support from the people at the meeting. To get the buy-in from those owners is at this stage not too difficult, although, as we said, it's difficult to convince people that they don't owe the roof and that they need to support the creation of exclusive use areas on the roofs. And then, of course, with the establishment of exclusive use areas, the rules need to be adapted to fit into the exclusive use areas to give more clarity on how these exclusive use areas will be dealt with, and who will be responsible for what. So the rules should deal with things like the type of solar panel that will be permitted. You will know much more about it, but there's obviously various types, there's sizes, there's shapes, and again, to keep it fairly straightforward, one would like to limit people to something that is fairly similar. Of course, the appropriate placement or location of the solar panels. As we said before, we need to ensure that there's some kind of aesthetical pleasing solution. These things are not always the best looking, but it's part of our lives now. But at least we need to put rules in place to ensure that it looks as nice as possible. And then, of course, we need to ensure that contractors that's going to install these things are qualified, and that they are not going to create more damage to the roofs as one would prefer. And then, as we said, the rules need to clearly establish who is responsible for the maintenance and repairs of the solar panels. I need to emphasize here that in the Act, the body corporate is the responsible party when it comes to common property. Exclusive use is just a different type of common property, and therefore one must really think it through well how you're going to deal with it. So in most cases, one will charge a fee, or the owners will take responsibility, although the body corporate can have the work done and put it on the account of the owner who have caused the problem. Uh, and of course, the biggest consideration there is where you cause damage to the roof while installing it, or with the weight, or by just being irresponsible when the installation is done. Okay, the next slide, we're not going to say too much about, because that's just solar panels in full title schemes. Of course, full title schemes will be homeowners associations where there's a scheme. And for that, you'll only have to go to the architectural guidelines. And in the guidelines, there may be certain provisions, although from the older schemes, nobody really thought about the solar panels 20 years ago. So some of the older schemes will not have that. But all additions will have to go to the Homeowners Association for approval. And at that point, I can perhaps just ask that in most municipalities, adding solar panels will require approved building plans in terms of the national building regulations. And normally the Homeowners Association must sign off on any plans to be submitted to council. So there is still a way for Homeowners Association to keep control of it. Okay, then the next one is the solar panels in individual in sectional title schemes. The next phase there you go back to solar panels in community schemes, and there we must emphasize that not all schemes, due to their physical features, are able to facilitate solar panels for each section. And therefore, it's necessary for a body corporate to really do a proper investigation before they just give owners permission to carry on installing solar on the roofs. And therefore, one needs to look at the different options that one have when you deal with solar. If we can go to the next slide. We already touched on that, the required authorizations. Technically, you need to make application to the body corporate when you apply for those rights, even if you have exclusive use areas registered. And of course, the body corporate needs to look at the different options that is possible, of which one would be to allow each owner to install his own panels, and for that one will have to register exclusive use areas. And the difficult part of that is that each owner is technically entitled to the square meterage of the roof as per his PQ. And you all should know, would know that PQ is derived from the size of his unit, and it's important to make sure that you can treat all owners in the same way. And of course, as you'll know, all buildings are not ideally designed for solar. You have north facing, you have south facing, west, east, but you must give every owner a fair chance to have enough space on the roof or wherever to make it possible for him to put up panels. A big issue that one also needs to take into consideration up front is something like trees. We're all very sensitive as far as trees are concerned, but it may be necessary to first remove some trees to make it possible for the sun to reach the roof that is allocated to certain areas, to a certain section. And that should be all considered before rules are made. We find that this is the exclusive use areas and the solar is treated as a separate issue, and then later on only body corporates become aware of problems as far as the practicalities of it is concerned. Okay, once we have exclusive use areas, of course, then we can, the trustees have more say over it, and that can be approved, and the maintenance can be dealt with in terms of Section 13(1)(q) of the STM Act, which provides that the body corporate must keep the solar panels in good and serviceable condition and properly maintain the plant, machinery, fixtures, and whatever. But now we need to understand the variety or the different types or configurations that this can consist of. I think we have said enough about the authorization. Let's just move on. Okay. Perhaps I must just, and that's our real field of expertise, and that is the ownership types that we've discussed already. The first way, or the first part of ownership in a sectional title is obviously your section, and the section consists of, or the unit consists of the section and the undivided share in the common property. And that means that each and every owner of a unit owns a portion of everything outside of another unit. And that include obviously all the driveways, all the gardens, all the parking areas for visitors that's not allocated specifically. And inside that, the owner have quite a big say on what's happening. So the question is, the inverter, the batteries, where will that be installed? The section stops typically at the ceiling and at the floor. So anything between the ceiling and the roof is also technically common property. So if you install batteries in the trusses area, technically that is also common property. And although it will be installed by the owner, who will maintain it? Who will be responsible for the insurance of that? Who will be insurance for damages that was caused by an installation that was done in common property? And then, of course, let me just go to the next one. And then we have everything outside of the sections is common property. Common property, as we said, is for the use of everybody, for their enjoyment and use. And that means that in a complex, the garden areas would also be common property. And if you live in a complex and you want to have a party for your grandchild or your child, technically you can go to any of those gardens and have your party there because it belongs to everybody. And therefore there is the option of registering parts of the common property as exclusive use for owner of a section or more than one section. And that is the tool that we suggest is used to register exclusive use areas on the roofs so that only that owner have use of it, and he can be held responsible for that area. So we now at the bird's eye view a slide from my side. I think it's a few slides down, but we just put in that slide to explain to owners and managing agents and estate agents that if you look from the top at any complex, basically everything that you see is common property. And that is where the problem comes in as far as installing panels either on the roofs or in garden areas or on carports for that matter. Okay, let's just go to the I don't think it's very important in your case, but there's two ways of registering the exclusive use area. So when you look at a specific complex, you'll either find that the exclusive use areas was registered by the land surveyor, surveying those areas and putting it on the sectional title plans. Very seldom that have been done in the past, and it's quite an expensive exercise to ask a land surveyor to put exclusive use areas on the plans later on, and therefore we have in the Sectional Title Management Act, we have the opportunity to create rule-based exclusive use areas. And for that, of course, as we said, we need to investigate solar-ready zones on the roofs. It's no use registering it in areas that's not suitable. We just have a typical, the next slide is a typical example of exclusive use area plan. What we need to indicate there is obviously the section. We need to indicate the exclusive use area, the square meterage of it, and the dimensions. And we need to specify what it can be used for. It's not that if you have a sectional, if you have exclusive use area registered for garden purposes, that you can now decide to put a solar panel on it, or you can use it to extend your structures or whatever. It is specific to the use that is specified on the plan, and this plan must be submitted to CSOS with the rules that will control those exclusive use areas. Before any solar panels can be installed on a roof, the rule should be in place, the plan should be in place, and it must be registered on at CSOS. We already went through the next slide saying what needs to be on it. The rules, the next slide just say that the rules needs to be amended. And then the aspects that needs to be covered in the rules, we had a quick look at. But there must be a written application to the trustees that should include indication of the components, plans and photographs of the aesthetic similarity, insurance replacement value, roof structure capability, and it must not negatively impact the structure's waterproofing and the fire integrity. There seems to be quite a bit of fire risk involved in solar, not only in the panels, but especially in some of the batteries. And then, of course, as we said, we must put the responsibility to the owners for the maintenance, repair, the replacement. A big problem that exists in the industry is especially where tenants are allowed to install solar panels and batteries. They are of the opinion, and if they move out, they remove it. Now, panels on the roof with certain brackets and holes and whatever, it is not advisable or recommended that those panels be removed, because the result, the damage that results from it, will obviously become the responsibility of the body corporate. The next tenant or whatever or owner of it is not going to want to take responsibility for it. So all of that should be in the rules. Okay, let's just see. Okay, Glen, I think perhaps after this you'll realize that allowing each owner to install his own panels on the roof is quite problematic. There is an alternative, and Glen, I think if you can perhaps take us into the decentralized solar and the centralized, basically, and that's where the body corporate will install all the panels on the roof, and then the owners can take it from there.
Yeah, thanks. Is everybody still there? It seems like we're talking to a screen.
No, it's great. It's very interesting.
Okay.
Carry on, please.
They're very quiet.
Yeah, it's Aubrey. It's that 20-minute conversation that you had with nobody.
Yes, like the other day. Yeah, that one. Okay,
So-
now you have the screen for yourself.
So that was a pie chart that Eskom did a number of years ago around the real consumers of electricity, and I think it's important to. I mean, this is free on the internet. It's important to note what's here. The one thing that's not considered here is the costs, is the service fees that are there. So that is a percent that those service fees, obviously we're not getting around too quickly, but that's ultimately in the domestic application where your consumption sits. We've understood solar in terms of panels and batteries and inverters, etc. But really, if we look at things today in terms of solar, the realistic side of solar is you're either fighting with security of supply, so ensuring you have some form of power when the lights go out, or savings, electrical savings. If you go back to that portion there, you can save 40 to 50% of your bill by installing solar geysers. In terms of security of supply, you can only address really your lights, refrigeration, appliances. Obviously, as your requirements grow, so too does the requirements of space on your roof. So in a sectional title space, you've got to understand what it is that you want to power and then have a sized array to suit. As Abrie said, you have what's called your PQ, and your PQ means that everybody is entitled to X amount of roof space, which means that, even if Unit 1 doesn't necessarily want to do it today, they might want to do it tomorrow when the new owner takes over. And if Unit 2 has taken all the roof space, well, now there's a problem. Unit 1 has every right to tell him to take it off. So playing between security of supply and electrical savings is really the tussle that's happening at the moment, I believe. I have just a few bits and pieces of what shouldn't go onto a system, but when you're looking at a complex with a large amount of units in it, there's certain things that we don't believe should be included as an overall package, simply because the draw of power, if you cannot eliminate certain things from your load, it's going to be problematic. Or the supplementation of your grid is going to be sort of really sized according to what the finance package is offering on the back-to-back. Centralized solutions, effectively just injecting an amount of power into the complex's grid with no elimination of load or no savings offered to the homeowner per se, because the electricity is injected behind the complex's meter. There certainly will be a savings to the complex's meter, but that savings not going to necessarily be passed on to the homeowner's meter, and those administrative costs of then deciding what savings could be available to each and every unit would be quite complicated to work out. It's also not completely something that you would be able to allow for a security of supply in the form of batteries and stuff, because typically you wouldn't be able to have geysers and those sorts of things running off batteries in a reasonable financial model. Decentralized solar is sort of a decentralizing of solar and injecting power into the units themselves behind the homeowner's meter, which would offer not only savings but allow you to modify where certain things wouldn't draw power from, by eliminating your geyser perhaps, or installing a solar geyser, by eliminating your lights, or having a critical load rather than just trying to power everything. A decentralized system in a sectional title environment is probably more reliable, or more probably simpler, so that it's not one failure point and the whole complex is down. It's easier to have one block down and affecting 5 units than have an entire system down and affecting 500 units. So the decentralizing and centralizing of solar is really just sort of an understanding of where you're injecting power, what the implications can be for the homeowner, for the body corporate, and to whose benefit. The centralized system is often touted on a rental type basis, and they typically give away some form of rights to the billing, so selling the rights to the billing to a third party contractor that's going to collect on the municipal accounts, etc., and then pass on that. It's very, very, very complicated to sort of sit at the end of a screen and say to people, well, what is the right solution? But there is no right solution for every system, or for every sectional title scheme. The schemes would need to be looked at one by one, and policies drawn up for each of them, and solutions tabled. When I said earlier on that there were applications, I believe, by SAIEE trying to resuscitate the solar water heating space, that is certainly an ideal environment for this. High density, many geysers, 40 to 50% savings of grid, the true meaning of load shedding. I don't know if there are any questions at this stage. I'll leave our details up for a second or two if you want to grab it. yeah, if there's anything, please shout. Aubrey, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Okay. Yeah, perhaps. I mean, we discussed basically what typically would be either duplexes or units that have each one have its own roof space. But of course, a lot of the sectional title complexes that we deal with is high-rise buildings. And therefore, that is a totally different ball game because there is just a very limited amount of roof space or even common property for the amount of units. So it's just important to know that it's not possible to provide these type of solutions to all sectional title complexes purely because there's not enough area to collect sun from to carry these systems. And therefore, one needs to do a proper investigation to ensure that your scheme is suitable for solar or for any other thing where you need panels for, of course.
So, Aubrey, one of the things that was quite interesting to me, and I know I'm talking as though we're talking to each other rather than talking to a group of people, but one of the things that has become more relevant recently with a complex in Cape Town was the liability issue that now starts to exist around the trustees, and more the solutions are being put on the table, and a lot of these solutions that are being put on the table mean that a flight of stairs in a multi-story building can be lit, they can be electrified, they can have a reliable source of power even during load shedding. So the risk of somebody falling down the stairs eliminates a liability aspect for trustees that have possibly previously not done anything. So there are solutions out there, and one of the big things is a liability issue that should the trustees do nothing, they stand liable for doing nothing as more and more solutions are put on the table. Obviously, that touches on the security of supply rather than necessarily the savings. While that does offer some savings, a liability issue is becoming more and more relevant, I think, in the sectional title space, and I think there's already been some form of judgment with this type of scenario happening in Cape Town as a result of it. I don't know the particulars of it, but I know that there has been.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. And that is 100% correct. I think there's a bigger picture to look at as far as these type of decisions that we expect trustees to make. The whole sectional title system depends on individuals that make themselves available to be trustees, and there's no legal requirement of the skills base of trustees. And therefore, it's a bit scary in a way that decisions for complexes, sometimes mostly multi-million rand complexes, is left in the hands of people that really are trying their best, but just don't have the skills in so many areas. I mean, if we talk about sectional title, solar is one of the areas where you need to be able to make some decision between various options with various presentations being made, and often it's just so difficult for trustees to get their heads around these type of things. And I take it for myself. I have skills based on certain aspects, but if I look at two presentations from different installers, I have no idea where to start. And I think what happened then easily and we find it in our office complex where we own a section, is that for years nobody is prepared to make a decision because there's so many positives, negatives, and it just moves over from set of trustees to the next, and another investigation, and another person doing a presentation. But it's really difficult for people, for trustees to make these type of decisions. There's lots of money involved, and it's very easy to make a wrong decision. So typically, being humans, no decision is made, and I'm not sure what the solution to that is. I think in future it would be there would be more executive managing agents running complexes than trustees. At this stage, we have trustees that's amazing human beings, but the chairperson might be the woman working in the library that have none of the skills to make these type of decisions. So yeah, I think that's something for the future for the industry to solve. How do you get people to make the right decisions on things that they have no clue about?
Another little just a point listening to Aubrey. Just so most of sectional title complexes are Section 21 or non-profit companies. So the incentives that are put on the table now. One, I think, specifically eliminate sectional title schemes, but is often puts the complex in a very odd position that their income is a product of their expense, of their current expense, and often they don't sit with huge amounts of budgets. They've got reserve funds, they've got those types of things, but their income is typically a product of their expense. So they're not sitting cash flush.
You're right.
Some complexes are sitting more cash flush than others, but it's not an environment where where necessarily the complex is sitting with a huge amount of money that can just throw all this money around, and that in itself becomes tricky because you've got to get permissions for loans, you've got to get all these types of things, and it doesn't make it easy.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. And then even more so, trustees have this idea that if you can have a zero increase in your levies, that you will be re-elected. Why they want to be re-elected, nobody knows, because it's really not the nicest of jobs. But yeah, there's lots of reasons why people, for good or bad, want to be trustees. And so part of the problem is that it's seen as a positive thing to have as low as possible increase in your levies. We all know that if you have an increase of less than 7% with inflation now, you're going backwards. So just imagine a 0% increase, the effect that will have on maintenance in the next 2-3 years. And therefore, I think it's more complicated than just the technicalities of it. The human factor, I think, is not playing with or in the favor of making good decisions in sectional title schemes, especially when it comes to big investments for future. And as we know, solar is not cheap, and so yeah, that's part and parcel of, as far as we see in practice, what's happening in the industry.
Gents, thanks very much. I see we've got a hand up from Mondi. Mondi, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, colleagues. Thanks for that informative presentation. It's really it's opening up another side that I think most of us around the table here are not aware. We're not aware of. But I just wanted to check. Maybe Glen, you will take this one. Is the configurations? I think you presented two configurations. One is centralized, and the other one is decentralized. So which one seems to be more popular to date in all these, in most complexes? So that's one. Which one is popular? And then the second part of the question is, one would have thought the centralized one would actually, the complex would they benefit from the economies of scale, which is, for example, you don't have to put a 3 kilowatt for each house. So you lump these together, and then you've got some diversity that you'll benefit on in terms of the load. And then you wouldn't have to, if it's 10 houses, you wouldn't have to do a 10 times 3 if it's a centralized. But if it's a decentralized, then it would have to be a 10 times 3, if it makes sense what I'm saying. Thanks.
Yeah, Mondi, I think the answer to that question is, does the load change in the house whether you centralize it or decentralize it? If you've still got a geyser and a stove and lights and whatever, and now you've got a decentralized system versus a centralized system, does it change the load that's being consumed? Yeah, and I would say not. It doesn't change the load. You still use it. You still use it as you would. The difference between the centralizing and the decentralizing is really manipulation of that load. In order to run a geyser, for example, it's a minimum of 3 kilowatts. So you've either got to decide you're not going to run those geysers with just the solar panels, or you're going to run them, and then you're going to need to oversize your array to suit to have the system running effectively. There can't be a if you're gonna supplement your existing load, you might not even supplement it to the extent that you even change tariff structure in the complex. So it's really about the use of, or the usage pattern of the house and how you alter the house's usage. I don't believe by centralizing it or decentralizing you save anything. Collectively, you just need to change the pattern of the right meter in order to benefit the homeowner. Otherwise, why would they do it? If you prejudice your billing in a centralized environment, why would the homeowner? We've seen systems now. I can't tell you what's more common at the moment. You probably find the most common one is the homeowner just putting a system in terms of a backup battery and an inverter, and probably not even having panels, because this debate rages about ownership. So the current system that's most common now is a UPS, which really is just security of supply and not offloading the grid at all. So yeah, I hope that answers your question in some fashion.
Thanks, Mondi. Do you have a response?
Maybe it would be something to think about without making it a debate. And maybe to the general, to all our members as well. I think there is something that we know that is alive. It's load diversity as you increase the number of customers. So it's just something to think about going forward. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mondi. Yes, I would expect diversity to have a bigger effect as your numbers get larger, but possibly with smaller concentrations of customers, it's not immediately obvious. I have a question. Just from a planning point of view, the question is really, what is the planning risk? And it seems like it's about whether the first decision note is whether these sectional title estates have exclusive use area rules set up. That seems to be the first decision node. If they don't, then your risk of solar is relatively low. Then the next question is, if a planner is sitting with a aerial photograph or something like that, is this a high-rise complex or is it a low-rise complex? And perhaps you gents, if you can comment on what you consider to be high-rise and low-rise, because it seems like if it's high-rise, there's somewhat less of a chance of systeming installed because there's so little shared exclusive use area available on the roof to install these systems, unless adjacent neighbors kind of lease each other's exclusive use area or something. Do you have any comment on what is low rise and high rise?
Yes.
Where does
Yeah.
it become unfeasible?
Yeah. Well, I think one can just start with single story, double story, and furthermore. Of course, single story is the easiest one to deal with, because you will have for each PQ you will have the same amount of roofed area approximately. So that's the easiest one to deal with, although you still have north facing, south facing, and various other things to consider. The problems start already when you have double story, and you only still have one north facing part of the roof, but you already need to supply 2 units with the same amount of roofed area as you would have had when it was single story. And again, as we mentioned, it depends on what the owner believe he can run from his system. We have mentioned, I mean, what one shouldn't run, but one needs to control, for instance, things like air conditioners. If a owner is of the opinion that he should be able to run his air conditioner from it, plus his kettle, plus his heaters, whatever it is, you're in trouble already on a single story. So once it becomes double story, of course, you have half of the capacity, and you still have the same need. The moment you go to multi-story, it really becomes what my impression, almost impossible, except perhaps for running the lights for the stairs and the common property and things like that. And then, of course, it's only a body corporate issue. There's no private ownership of it. There's no need for exclusive use areas. So the roofs can be enough to carry the lights for instance, the stairs and the common property. But yeah, there's a lot of variables to keep in mind. But yeah, I think once you go to double story, that already can become complicated. You also don't want to fill up each and every piece of garden that's common property with solar panels. So yeah, there's the balance between the need for electricity and the need for a quality environment to live in.
Yeah, thanks. This is very interesting. One thing you're pointing out with the high rises is that it is possible that they could start to change the designs. There's not a lot of risk for existing multi-stories, but once the architects get hold of it, perhaps there's more potential for parking lots to become solarized in a group scheme.
Yes,
What do you think
definitely.
of the risk of that?
Yeah, that of course. If it's designed correctly, and of course, then the placement of the carports become important. The angles of the roofs, or a way to attach panels to it, will be very helpful. But then, of course, when you go to areas that mostly have high-rise buildings, you have the further complication of shadows of other high rises on the properties next door, that will limit the amount of solar panels that will be effective even more. So there's just certain areas where it would be more and more difficult. Except I think with the increased interest in panels or ways of collecting the energy, I think in future we might look at, and that's more your field of expertise, windows in high-rise buildings that can do the job of panels now, so that the whole building will consist of energy collecting windows that would be able to solve some of the requirements that we can't meet with solars that needs roofed areas or garden areas.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. There's a possibility that designs may change, and it'll be probably north-facing with carports and less shading.
Correct. Yes.
From that side.
Yeah.
One of the other challenges is that, SANS 10400 XA has been out for quite some time, and until these sorts of things are properly policed, the 50% water heating should come from alternative sources, and the likes, double glazing and etc., and all sorts of things. We would have already been making quite big inroads into saving electricity if these things were being monitored and policed. But you're getting certificates of occupation getting signed off in various municipalities, etc., without even the inclusion of a solar water heater or a heat pump or alternative sources of heating, which is specified in 10400 XA. So do you think the architects are going to change it? I'm sorry, I'm not at this stage of the day. I'm not completely subscribed to the idea. I think I look at the biggest one. One of the bigger ones at the moment is Baldwin. That's been doing it for quite some time, and I don't particularly think that they're going to change their commercial implications to suit immediately. Perhaps I'm wrong, but that's just my view.
Thank you. That the policing of 10400 XA is very interesting, because that is clearly a risk. The last thing is, if you can go back to your pie chart, it's probably unnecessary to show it now, but there you showed a pie chart from 2013 where something like around 40 to 49% of household energy was roughly involved in the water heating function.
Yeah.
What about the installation of heat pumps and devices like that, which have relatively low footprint, but can reduce the draw of water heating by perhaps a third, down to a third?
Yeah.
Are you seeing big moves on that?
Yeah. Look, I can only speak from what has happened historically. I mean, this is not the first explosion of load shedding that we've had, and it's not going to probably be the last. And we've sort of, everything has been thrown into the spotlight now. And back then, when they adopted heat pumps into the mix, they looked at it and they said, well, unless it can achieve a COP of 3 or something like that, it wasn't going to deliver what it needed. And as a result of that, they chucked them off the Eskom rebate program, where they were trying to stimulate this type of thing. So have we seen an uptake in it? Yes, they're out there, and I think it's because it's put, it's just another product that can be sold to offer those things. But I don't think people go into the depth of understanding whether or not the savings are actually achievable. So we are seeing more of these things out there all the time, and they have a huge implication to the insurance, which obviously has a massive implication on the body corporate's finances. So it's a bit of a whirlpool effect. If they don't maintain those things, for example, that cost in the region of 20,000 Rand a unit, excluding the geyser, the warranty is void on it immediately, which changes on a complex of 100 units times 20,000, which have just all been voided because they haven't done maintenance on a heat pump. It's a hell of a risk for the insurer. It's a hell of a cost for the homeowner to pick up. Yes,
certainly. And I really appreciate what you said about maintenance. That is a big after-sale issue that is often ignored. Gents, thanks very much. I see that Trevor van der Verf has joined us, and if my understanding is correct, he's part of your team. If so, Trevor, you've watched this presentation. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Thanks for that. Lloyd would remember that SAIEE was involved in the supply of, or monitoring the supply of solar water heaters in the recent Eskom rebate program. Now, at that stage of the day, I was involved in an organization called SAIEE, and we were tasked with monitoring what came in and what was installed. So you had to become a member of SAIEE to be part of this whole game. When the game started, we had less than a dozen suppliers. When the thing got going, within the first year, we had over 600 suppliers.
Wow.
That cropped up from all over the show, from east to west of the world. The end result was that there was a total bun fight to monitor what was good and what wasn't good. Today, a couple of years later, we're back to a handful of suppliers. All the guys have left. The net result is that there are a lot of companies, or rather users, which have products that have got no spares.
And no support.
And no support. So it's a consideration. I don't know how it's ever going to be managed now, because there's talk of this new subsidy and the rebate. I don't know if it's kicked off as yet. I don't know who's going to monitor it. But it's a consideration. And with PV, it's even a bigger problem. With your inverters are a lot more sensitive than a water heater. So I think somewhere along the line, we must be warned, because with a solar water heater, there's a control. You can't just import it unless you've got an LOA. With an inverter, you can import anything you want to. There's no restriction at all. I personally have brought inverters in. They've been the biggest lot of rubbish out. Somebody goes out, he's got a few bucks, he goes to China, buys a container load of inverters. Yeah, there's a problem. There's a problem coming.
Yeah, Trevor, do you think that the user should be buying some kind of a longer-term security in some way? Answer that, and then Wayne's got a question. Thanks.
Well, something has got to be done. It's a free-for-all as far as we can understand. I don't know how active the ECA is in signing these off. I know of many that have got no signing off. They just installed them. Having said that, it might be an unnecessary obstacle to... No, it's not unnecessary, because should unit number 5 have a fire, it will affect unit number 6. So, yeah, I mean, we have approached the IPP office back in the day, but we got no response from them to say that this lot needs monitoring. Yes, there has to be some regulation.
Okay. I'll just park it there. Wayne Kitching, you want to come in with your comment?
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I was just wondering, have you found that there are private companies that will go in and take over the energy supply of a sectional title complex, and then do the billing, do the maintenance? They maintain maybe a generator and PV and an Eskom supply, like a hybrid system, and then they will typically be in the business, so they will ensure that the quality is there. Do you find that kind of arrangement anywhere, or not really?
Yeah, it's coming in all over. But I think in our experience that we've seen, we crossed it in a very peculiar way, where we were asked by the insurer to get involved and assist. And it was when we crossed the scenario that we realized that it was them in the business of it, and they're not in the business of it to make friends. It's also about making money for them. So they were doing, we were battling with it with regards to the integrity of trying to save people money versus trying to charge them electricity to make money off them. And that was the problem that we experienced, or that was the scenario we experienced in a number, 3 complexes, and so that was a centralized solution that was where their billing, and I say the billing of the homeowner, was prejudiced in that it was given up to a third party who was utilizing the bulk purchasing to make money, and obviously not necessarily wanting to save the homeowner money.
Yeah, I guess just to add to this, I guess they may come with the argument that they are providing a premium product because it is more reliable than the grid. But this is just obviously on your high end that might be the argument. But I know that there's also in terms of is it the Electricity Act or something where you're not really allowed to make money out of the resale of electricity. So yeah.
Well, I think when it goes into the section, they're certainly doing it in that place. They were doubling the people's bill.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. They were doubling the people's bill, and they were using the geyser to manipulate it. That's how we got involved in it. So they were then also Aubrey, what is the right term when the insurer gives notice on the building that they need to move, that they're uninsurable because their claims ratio goes the wrong way?
Terminate. Yeah.
And when they get given notice, that is largely that. That is, I mean, for a complex where it's legislated that they have to have insurance, they now prejudice the insurance policy. They now prejudice the billing, and all of a sudden your complex is in a downward spiral.
Yeah, and that's put on top of more and more owners not paying their levies, and therefore more and more of the complexes going under administration, basically, and even that is not done properly. So, there's huge problems in the industry, and growing as less people can afford or are interested in paying their levies. It is a uphill battle to get a person to pay levies or to sell his unit at an auction to recover the money that he haven't paid for a year or 2 or 3. So,
Aubrey, just to touch on a point there, they also have a you just said that the non-payment of levies, but you also find them not being able to service their bonds, and as such, the banks are very tricky with assisting in certain things, and that's why you've got specialists like StrataFin and ZDFin, and these guys having to come in to take control again. And because these centralized scenarios are being touted so and implemented on a rent-to-own basis, where only trustees are having to make the decision, there's a lot of blood noses of trustees walking around because they're either being pointed fingers at as being on the take or something as a result of not getting a special resolution at an AGM, or whatever the terms are, where everybody unanimously agrees on this type of scenario.
Gents, I think you've opened up stuff that we want you to know as planners, but you've also exposed a whole lot of other issues, and as Mondi said, it's a real eye-opener. But we have touched on, I think, the items that do indicate what the risk is like for network planners, and for that I must thank you, Abrie, and you, Glen, and Trevor, for your comments. It's been a very interesting talk, and at this stage I think we should terminate. Once more, thank you from myself as the co-chair of the Load Research Chapter. I really appreciate you giving us the reality here. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thanks, Glenn.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay.
Thanks to Load Research Chapter. We'll kill the meeting now and talk later. Thank you.